And that's when you see blood sugars go up. So that's when you first see prediabetes happen. And then a little bit more progression, we see diabetes happen. The good part about this progression is it's not unidirectional, right? And we used to think that it was, but it's not. You can actually reverse this process by simply creating kind of situation where you can get rid of the fat that's causing the problem. And lifestyle medicine is based on the fact that the most impactful thing we can do is improve our core lifestyle behaviors of nutrition, movement, sleep, stress tolerance, relationships, and purpose. And so it's one of the paradoxes of insulin resistance is, why am I hungry and having cravings when I'm gaining weight, right? Like, I've got lots of energy on board. What? Back to metabolic flexibility. You don't have the metabolic flexibility to access that fat. Yeah, so it's an evidence-based strategy we developed to help reverse that insulin resistant process. So the process that really underlies type 2 diabetes.
Right.
But diets don't work, right? They're temporary restrictive measures that we all have tried, but we all quit them, right? And so what we want to do is change the quality of nutrition that we're eating.
There is a program you can sign up for. So if you're diabetic or pre-diabetic in Ontario, BC, or Alberta, we're currently launched. So it's covered by your provincial medical plan. You get a detailed lifestyle medicine with a consultation with one of our physicians, potentially with Dr. Byrne here or with one of our other awesome physicians. We make you a personalized report. There's a huge online curriculum with like over 24 hours of content. And these weekly group sessions.
It really is special, and it's something kind of as physicians running these sessions, it's quite a privilege, right? Like we get to see people kind of doing the hard work. We often joke we're like Sherpas. We can't climb the wall, kind of give you a better direction.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to The Path, the podcast from LifestyleRx. My name's Dan. I'm the CTO here at LifestyleRx, and joining me for this podcast is Dr. Byrne. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, Brendan Byrne. I'm the Chief Medical Officer of LifestyleRx. I've been working in lifestyle medicine for the last 5 or 6 years, helping people with type 2 diabetes achieve remission.
Awesome. So I guess to jump right in, maybe the first thing we'll go over is where the idea for this podcast came from.
Well, as you know, Dan, we've been offering this 12-week diabetes reversal program for the past year through LifestyleRx, and for the previous 5 years through our lifestyle medicine clinic, Wellness Garage. We wanted to create something for people that are either not quite ready to commit to a group, so something that they could use to get them ready to commit to a group, and also for those people who have finished the program. A lot of them have said that they miss kind of touching base on some of the materials that we go through. The group and the online community will benefit from having kind of this weekly podcast. So we're going to put all the episodes into the community, and we're going to have the ask a question feature hosted there as well.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing all those questions that people send in for us to answer. So I guess continuing along the theme of this podcast here, maybe you want to explain a little bit about the name of The Path and where that, how we got to that, where that came from.
Yeah, so we really, LifestyleRx is all about a lifestyle medicine approach for diabetes reversal. And lifestyle medicine is based on the fact that the most impactful thing we can do is improve our core lifestyle behaviors of nutrition, movement, sleep, stress tolerance, relationships, and purpose. And we do this kind of one behavior at a time. And so we came up with the metaphor of the path. And the path is really that set of behaviors or habits that align with your body's physiology. When you're consistent and persistent with these behaviors, your body heals and you feel better, you lose weight, your inflammation goes away, and insulin resistance improves. So, for us is to get on that path and then stay the path. And really, this is what the podcast is here to do, is to help people find their path and stay on it.
All right, excellent. So I know one thing we talk about a lot when we're talking about diabetes reversal in our programs and stuff is this concept of metabolic health. And I know it makes a lot of sense to physicians out there, but maybe for those of us who haven't heard the term before or don't quite know what it means, maybe a good thing to do would just be for us to break that down and explain what metabolic health actually is.
Sure, sure. Well, first of all, metabolism, it's a fancy word for what we do with food, right? And so basically we use food for three big things, right? We use food to for energy, we use food for growth, and we use food for repair. So it provides kind of the building blocks for those things. When we talk metabolic health, we're often talking around energy. And so when we're eating food for energy, it's predominantly the carbohydrates and fats that we're eating are predominantly what we're going to use for energy. And then interestingly, our body has the ability to store carbs. We store carbs as glycogen. We have the ability to store fat, and we all know where we how we store fat as
Yeah.
fat. Um, and what happens in type 2 diabetes and really through the metabolic health progression is you start to lose the ability to burn fat, and it's one of the things that we see. And so people start to lose their metabolic flexibility where they actually have plenty of stored energy on board, i.e. fat, but they can only burn carbohydrates. They can only use the glycogen in their muscles. They can't actually use fat as fuel. And so metabolic flexibility is that ability to flip between, using carb as fuel, so using stored glycogen or food coming in, but also using stored fat. And so really, when we talk about full metabolic health, it's being able to use the fuels that are available, including your stored energy.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. And then I guess when we start to get into pre-diabetes or diabetes, this kind of progresses along a path, right? So how does that work? Like, where does it go from being normal and having that flexibility to getting into the more of those issues?
Yeah, so we call it metabolic health progression, and really kind of you can almost think about these stages that are a little bit like dominoes falling. So energy, as we just talked about, we get from food, right? So if we eat more energy than we use in a given period of time, we store the extra energy as fat. Our bodies are very thrifty. We don't waste energy. So we'll store it as fat. That's great. Tomorrow we might not get enough food, so we'll use that little bit of stored energy from today. um, each of us can store a certain amount of fat safely, right? And for most people, the safe zones for fat is the subcutaneous, so just under the skin, in your legs, your hips, your butt. That's the safe zone for fat. And kind of, think about the pear shape, right? You talk about apple shaped people, pear shaped people. Pear shape is you're storing it kind of in your legs. That's healthy fat. When that fat gets full, and each of us have a different threshold for how much that is,
Mm-hmm.
we start to spill over fat. I sometimes use the metaphor of, some people have a bucket that they can store, so they don't store very much. Some people have a bathtub, so they can store a lot before they spill over. But once we spill over, we start to see fat in the places it shouldn't be. And so on the outside, you see that as belly fat. But on the inside, it's actually fat inside the cells of the liver, inside the cells of the muscles, and also inside the cells of the pancreas, that causes this problem of insulin resistance. And so insulin resistance is basically, insulin is our body's, it's really our energy storage hormone. It
Mm-hmm.
controls blood sugars, and it it attaches to a receptor on these muscles that stops working properly. And so you need more insulin in order to get the same effect. And so you get this kind of funny thing that happens when you start getting this fat in the wrong places is you get insulin resistance. So insulin doesn't work. So the pancreas responds by cranking out more insulin. And so insulin levels start to rise. But insulin's an energy storage hormone. It's sending
Mm-hmm.
the signal to your body to store energy. And so you start to gain more fat, and you start to get in this vicious cycle where it's the fat in the cells that's causing insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is causing higher levels of insulin that's causing more fat gain, and you get more fat in the cells.
So you're in
And
a
so,
catch-22, basically.
right. And so people find themselves in this, phase where they're, they're getting increasing insulin resistance. They're getting a lot of food cravings because they're eating, they're storing the energy. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like somebody put a turnstile on the fat, right? So they can store fat, but they can't get it out.
Check out.
Um, and so it's one of the paradoxes of insulin resistance is, why am I hungry and having cravings when I'm gaining weight, right? Like I've got lots
Yeah.
of energy on board. back to metabolic flexibility, you don't have the metabolic flexibility to access that fat. When we look at this process, what happens is it takes place over time. And so for the most of this
Mhm.
time, if you're measuring your blood sugars, they're normal
The
because
normal.
your
Yeah.
pancreas is just compensating by releasing more and more insulin. Eventually, the pancreas gets affected too, and it can't
Mm.
keep up and it can't keep releasing more insulin. And that's when you see blood sugars go up. So that's when you first see prediabetes happen. And then a little bit more progression, we see diabetes happen. The good part about this progression is it's not unidirectional, right? And we
Mm.
used to think that it was, but it's not. You can actually reverse this process by simply creating kind of situation where you can get rid of the fat that's causing
Fat.
the problem.
You have to somehow unlock that turnstile, I guess, to use that same metaphor, so it can go the other way, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and you do that, and that's really what the 4+2 strategy is all about. It's all
Mhm.
about taking all the actions you can take to you know unlock and reverse that process.
Yeah. So for those people who are not quite at that pre-diabetic stage yet, where the blood sugar's still normal and stuff, is there things they can watch out for, like warning signs that they'll see that they're on this path before they can see those abnormal blood sugar results?
Absolutely, right? So first thing, is just plain weight, right? So um well, if you're starting to gain weight, then that's something you got to watch, right? And so if you're gaining weight and you're gaining fat, you're going to want to watch that. Your waist circumference is going to start to help you understand, are you
Mhm.
crossing that fat threshold, right? And so if your waist circumference, if you measure your waist circumference really kind of at the widest part of your belly, kind of usually it's around the belly button or just under. If you're a man and it's over 102, that's a warning sign. If you're a woman and it's over 88, that's a warning sign.
And those
Um,
are centimeters, right?
Centimeters, yeah, centimeters. So those are things that you can do. The other thing you start to notice is if you're getting hungry shortly after eating,
Mhm.
that's often a sign that
Okay.
something's happening there. And kind of what you're experiencing is, you're probably releasing a lot of insulin, packing those calories away quickly, and then not accessing them. Same thing with craving, same thing with energy crashes and fatigue.
Mhm.
So those are all kind of symptoms that you might have. And if you do labs, so if you have a lab panel and it's like, hey, my blood sugar is normal, but I think I might be insulin resistant.
Yeah.
Um, what you want to look at is there basically the ratio of triglycerides to HDL cholesterol. So this is
Okay.
kind of a little inside baseball kind of type of statistic, but there's a ratio there. If it's greater than one, so meaning that you take your triglyceride and divide it by the HDL, and
Yeah.
then numbers greater than one, that's a warning sign. And if it's greater than 1.7, you probably almost assuredly have insulin resistance.
Mm.
And that would actually, qualify for our 12-week program. If that was the case, you just talk to your family doctor and point out to them, hey, I think I've got insulin resistance, and
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. So there is that way that you can actually check with the labs, and also if you obviously notice those symptoms or anything. So you mentioned earlier a little bit about the 4+2 strategy, and our program and community and everything's obviously based on that to try and reverse that process, unlock that turnstile to let the fat to go back down those levels. So maybe for those who aren't familiar with it, if you want to just explain a little bit more about what that 4+2 strategy is and how we use it in Lifestyle RX.
Yeah, so it's an evidence-based strategy we developed to help reverse that insulin resistant process. So the process that really underlies type 2 diabetes. And there are four kind of key actions that help that do this, and they basically help people lose fat and therefore lose the hepatic fat or liver fat, which is what's driving that insulin resistance. So the first thing we want to do is we want to eat in such a way that we don't need as much insulin, right?
Mm.
Because if we're eating foods that are full of sugar or foods that are full of fast carbohydrates, they actually require a bunch of insulin when you eat them, right? So,
Hmm.
so that has your pancreas cranking out a whole bunch of insulin, which then packs those nutrients away. So
Yeah.
we want to actually stop that, and so we really focus on changing kind of the what people are eating, getting rid of those fast carbohydrates. Also making sure that we don't eat foods that are going to generate energy overload, right? Because we kind of talked about this ultimately there's, insulin resistance is a product of energy overload.
It's too much.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, too many calories over time. So the ultra processed foods, right?
Mhm.
They're foods that, they're kind of like industrial packaged foods that, the foods that have ingredients that, you in your
Yeah.
chemistry class in high school, to
Yeah.
decipher the fast foods. Those foods just don't generate a satiation signal proportional to the amount of calories you're getting, right? So
Mhm.
that's the experience that all of us maybe at one point or another have in our lives, where you go to McDonald's and you get a Big Mac, big
You're
fries.
hungry right away afterwards, right?
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
They just don't generate the satiation signal. So we work with people to kind of get rid of those, substitute those out of your diet, um, and uh, and then the other piece that we look at kind of in the eating strategy is making sure that you're getting enough protein with every meal and enough fiber with every meal, because those
Mhm.
are the satiating factors. And so you want to kind of align that your food is sending the right signals to tell your body kind of what's coming in. The second part is so the first part is very much around nutrition quality, and
And with that nutrition, we don't put anyone on any, like, specific diet or anything, right? It's all just making those changes,
no,
right?
but diets don't work, right? They're temporary restrictive measures that we all have tried, but we all quit them, right? And
Mhm.
so what we want to do is change the quality of nutrition that we're eating. And if we can change the quality of nutrition such that our bodies register what's coming in,
Mhm.
our bodies are amazing. And you think about it, right? The average person eats 1.25 million calories per year,
Wow.
right?
That's a
So
lot.
and most of the obesity epidemic is on the basis of that people tend to gain about a pound per year from age 18 to age 50. At age
Hmm.
50, that turns into insulin resistance and becomes the problem.
Yeah.
It's that accumulated weight over time. That's 9 calories per day, that pound per year. Like, so
That's it.
our onboard computer is phenomenal. There's no way that counting calories on your own, you're going to be able to beat this onboard computer. So
Yeah.
what you want to do is deliver the inputs that the onboard computer expects, which are
Yeah, they'll
whole food.
recognize. Yeah.
Yeah. So whole foods, not ultra processed foods. Kind of making sure that you're kind of aligning with enough protein and fiber to get those satiation signals. And so that's nutrition quality is kind of the first part of this strategy.
Mhm.
The second part leverages your muscles, which are your metabolic engine, right? And
Yeah.
so your muscles do. There are two big, really important things in this thing. Yeah. So one is they're actually the destination for any of the carbs that you do eat, right? So when you eat carbs, 80 to 90% of those carbs will end up being stored as glycogen in the muscle
Mhm.
to be used for activity later. So if you're sedentary and you're not exercising, there's no
Yeah.
room to be in. So what happens is those carbs can't go into the muscle because there's no room there. Those carbs actually get turned into fat in the liver. Those triglycerides that we talked about in your lab test, that's
Yep.
actually the fat that's predominantly coming from the carbohydrate that you've been eating.
Hmm.
So again, kind of what we see there is let's be active, use our muscles, continue to create lots of room at the end to store any additional carb that we eat. The other thing is when your muscles are nice and healthy and you're exercising, especially in that aerobic zone, kind of that easy aerobic zone where you're kind of light exercise, where you're breathing rapidly but you're not out of breath. Your
Yeah.
muscles prefer to burn fat, right? And so if we're trying to
Mhm.
reverse this insulin resistance process by losing weight, ultimately we got to burn fat.
Yeah.
So if we can get our muscles going that they're really good at burning fat, and they get really good by exercising in that zone of exercise, then that's going to help as well.
Yeah.
So the muscles play these two really key roles. And I guess there's a third role, which is if you can add muscle bulk, which for those of us over 50 is always a little bit harder. But if you can add muscle bulk, more muscle burns more energy at rest. So you get a
Just
higher
improves
metabolic
everything.
rate.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
And that exercise you're talking about, it's not like, running a marathon or lifting, doing anything extreme. It's that I don't want to call it easy, but that easier zone of exercise, right? Just the
yeah. So, I mean, such a good point, right? So, the World Health Organization talks about 150 minutes per week of exercise, moderate to vigorous exercise. Going for a brisk walk is moderate exercise.
Mm.
Going for a light jog or a little bit of a run could be vigorous exercise. 150 minutes a week is 20 to 30 minutes a day. What we try to get people going is ideally what I want you to do is something every day. And
Hmm.
so build a frequency habit first. Start with something small. You can build duration over time. And then when you start getting fit, you can add the intensity, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
many people, when they get started back with exercise, they add the intensity.
Too
It
soon.
feels
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's actually incredibly gentle. And we've had some amazing kind of stories in our groups. I had one person who had really severe osteoarthritis and was really quite heavy. And she said to me, "Look, I can only like walk like 30 meters in the courtyard. That's all I can do." So
Yeah.
we said, "Great, that's what your minimum is for the day."
Yeah. Do that.
But by the end of the program, she was walking for 30 to 40 minutes. And
Wow.
I thought the thing that was really cool was she signed up for an exercise program at the community, fitness center. So her whole identity had changed, right? She
Yeah.
went from
Yeah.
somebody that I can't exercise because I'm limited to somebody that I do exercise even though I'm limited, to somebody that is like, hey, I'm actually getting fit. I'm getting fitter. I'm losing weight. I actually feel really good, and I like
Yeah.
being an exercising person. So yeah, so
Yeah.
using your muscles, kind of second part of this. The third one is kind of in a way it's kind of obvious because so much of what's happening is at the liver. In terms of insulin resistance that's causing the type 2 diabetes. It's fat in the liver.
Hmm.
We just don't, if we've already got fat there, we don't want to throw fuel on the fire,
Yeah.
right?
Make it
So
worse. Yeah.
yeah, alcohol, and then alcohol is kind of the obvious one, but
Yeah.
also fructose, right? So
Interesting.
yeah, so if we look at fructose, it's a type of sugar.
Hmm.
Table sugar is actually a molecule of glucose stuck to a molecule of fructose, so it's why we call
Okay.
it disaccharide. So, um, but the fructose, when it comes in high concentrations, basically gets turned into fat in the liver. And so, where do you get it in high concentrations? Think of energy drinks, pop, other
Mm.
things where high
That
sugar,
high fructose corn syrup that you
high
see all
fructose
the
corn
time, right?
syrup.
Yeah.
Um, and so that gets turned into fat in the liver, and just it's fuel on the fire, right? You've already got the issue there, so we
Mm.
want to try to get rid of that. And then the third one, which is really not obvious around being kind to your liver, is if you're getting digestive symptoms or you're getting gut issues, what you'll find is just that there's often inflammation in the gut. The
Mm.
gut, the blood from the gut drains to the liver, which again is not that obvious. So if
Interesting.
you have inflammation in the gut, you're going to get inflammation in the liver, and then inflammation in the liver makes it more likely that you're going to get fat in the liver. So again,
Mhm.
not very obvious, but one of the
Yeah.
things we identify really quickly in the program is people that are having digestive issues. If they haven't settled down after the first 4 weeks, I really like to get them working with our dietitian one-on-one because
Yeah.
um, it's super fixable, but sometimes it just takes a little bit of work.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, those three things. I got through this. Those
Yeah.
three things set you up to lose fat, right? And so they kind of establish the conditions that you should start to see that you can start to burn some fat. So then we kind of do something that's pretty straightforward. We start with just a 12-hour fast, which is kind of normal, right? But a lot of
Yeah.
people are not fasting 12 hours; they're only fasting 8 or 9 hours. So we
Mhm.
kind of make sure they go to 12 hours. And what we're trying to do is in the normal circadian rhythm, we're designed to eat and be active during the daytime, rest and digest at nighttime. And in the daytime, we're using predominantly glucose for fuel. In the nighttime, we're using fat for fuel. So again, that metabolic flexibility.
Yeah.
We're flipping the switch, right? The metabolic switch, you flip over into fat burning. And then as that becomes easy to do 12 hours, if we're trying to lose weight, we extend that out to 16 hours. We just spend a few more hours in that fat burning window.
Hmm.
It works really well for insulin resistance. And predominantly because most of the time with insulin resistance, your insulin levels are high during the day and they're inhibiting fat. They're back to that fat turnstile.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
nighttime, they drop low enough that you actually unlock that fat burning
Can go the other way.
and
Yeah.
you go the other way. And so you get that switch going. And it's really fun to see, we'll see people who like they can't fast more than 8 hours and within a few weeks they're fasting 14 hours and they're feeling
Wow.
great.
Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
they're going crazy. I'm fasting 14 hours and I'm not hungry and I don't have any cravings. What's going on? But those are the signs that this is working, right?
Yeah,
And so that's
yeah,
the earliest sign that you see is that you start losing these symptoms. The 4+2 has the +2, right? So those
yep,
four
yep.
things generally for most people, that's the path. The +2 are the wild cards, and so stress and sleep, they both drive cortisol, and cortisol, it's our stress hormone. What it does is it mobilizes energy. And the problem is, it was designed, our stress system was designed when there was a bear chasing us or a saber tooth, right?
Yeah,
Now our stresses are mainly psychological. And so we get this stress response that actually turns around, and cortisol increases glucose production in your liver. So you pump more glucose into your
trying to
blood,
get you ready to run away from the bear, right?
give you the energy, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It also breaks down your healthy peripheral fat, that healthy safe zone fat,
yeah.
breaks that down and puts fatty acids into the bloodstream.
Mhm.
And then if you don't use that glucose and you don't use the fat that it's kind of mobilized, it then predominantly you end up storing the resulting energy as visceral fat,
So it's taking the good fat and just turning it into bad fat. Just
basically,
yeah.
right? And you see it really dramatically when people are on prednisone or kind of synthetic cortisol for autoimmune diseases or
Mhm.
arthritis. The side effect of it is that you 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 basically lose peripheral fat. And I forgot to
Mhm.
say, you also break down muscle. You actually break down muscle to turn amino acids into fat, right? So
Wow. Yeah,
so people on prednisone, they lose muscle bulk, they lose their peripheral fat, they end up with lots of visceral fat, and
yeah.
just going on that alone can actually drive somebody into type 2 diabetes. So,
Wow. Yeah.
so again, everybody's individual. We've got to assess these things.
Mhm. And the last one then is there's one more, right? Sleep.
Sleep, yeah, and sleep, kind of our big metabolic reset. So we talked a little bit about the metabolic switch going there. It's also what's we get the cortisol levels down, and it's your ultimate recovery, right? And
Mhm.
so one of our kind of thinking around stress is that we can tolerate a lot of stress in our lives if we get a proportionate amount of recovery. Sleep is our biggest recovery factor, and so people that aren't sleeping, you tend to not recover from the stress that you do have, and then
Yeah.
not sleeping in and of itself can cause rises in cortisol that can make your blood sugars worse.
Cool. So yeah, so that's the 4+2 strategy, and that's kind of what we teach in our 12-week program, and then also we talk about in the community all the time. So for the benefit of the listeners here who are kind of new to this material and are new to LifestyleRx, there is a program you can sign up for. So if you're diabetic or pre-diabetic in Ontario, BC, or Alberta, we're currently launched. So it's covered by your provincial medical plan. You get a detailed lifestyle medicine with a consultation with one of our physicians, potentially with Dr. Byrne here or with one of our other awesome physicians. We make you a personalized report. There's a huge online curriculum with like over 24 hours of content, and these weekly group sessions, which you talked to about a couple times, but I've been to them, a few of them, and they're actually just like the coolest thing ever. You get a bunch of other people going through the program, and they're quite awesome.
Yeah, there really are something, in the sense that um, one of the best examples I heard of why these groups work is, um, somebody told me this. They said, I was listening in the group the other day, and this woman described kind of her feeling, and how she kind of was beating up on herself, and I felt so empathetic and compassionate for her. And then I realized that what she was saying was the same voice I have in my own head when I beat
Hmm.
myself up over things. And so I think the insights that when you hear somebody else going through the same thing, and
Yeah,
you realize that it's sometimes it's easier to have compassion for others than for
for
yourself.
yourself. Yeah.
I find with behavior, when we're trying to change our behaviors, um, it's so much is in your mindset. And we unfortunately, when we try to do things, we sometimes get locked into this all or none thinking of, we need to be perfect, and if we're not perfect, then we're failing, and this terrible
Hmm.
voice comes in our head and says these horrible things. When you're in the group and you hear other people kind of struggling, it really makes you kind of go, hey, you know what? I got to be more gentle with myself, because
Yeah.
that person is doing awesome, right? Like, they've made all these
Yeah.
changes and they're doing awesome. And you
Yeah.
realize, I'm that person. I'm doing all these changes. I'm,
Yeah.
so
Definitely.
Yeah, it really is special, and it's something kind of as physicians running these sessions, it's quite a privilege, right? Like we get to see people kind of doing the hard work. We often joke we're like Sherpas. We can't climb the mountain, kind of give you a better direction.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, so before we get on to the next stuff, I just want to mention if anyone's interested in that, you can head to the show notes, the links wherever you get this podcast from, and you can click the link there and sign up, and we'd be happy to have you. And if you're not in one of those places where we've launched so far, there'll also be a link there to join our community. You can do that from anywhere. There's a bunch of the contents in there. You can uh, see what other people are asking questions, ask questions yourselves, and talk to other people who are going through it. So there is something available there, even if you're not in Ontario, BC, or Alberta, where we're currently launched, and we're hopefully coming to more places soon. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so we'll go on then to our question that we've picked out. So we asked in the community, we asked for a bunch of questions, and we had an outstanding response. So there was so
Yes,
many questions, so
it
we
was
have
unbelievable.
lots of time to get through all of them. So we picked out one for this week. So the question we're going to answer today is from someone that said, "I stop eating at 7 p.m. and my blood sugar is at 6 millimoles per liter. And then when I go to bed, why does it go up to 8 in the morning when I wake up, even though I've not eaten anything? So it's at 6 before they go to bed, and then it's higher in the morning at 8, and they didn't eat anything. So where's
Yeah.
that coming from?"
So this is one of the most common questions, and it's just a great question. And so you kind of have to understand back to all what we've been talking about with the fuel and metabolic flexibility. So when you're active in the daytime and you're eating, your blood sugar is coming largely from the meals that you eat.
Mm-hmm.
After a meal, eventually all the glucose trickling into the blood stops. You've absorbed everything. And so when you're not eating, your liver's producing the glucose, right?
Mm-hmm.
At a normal, Dan, do you remember how much glucose is the normal 5.5 millimoles per liter? How much glucose is that in your blood?
1 teaspoon.
Yeah, it's a little factoid that still amazes me, but
Yeah.
a teaspoon of glucose is circulating in your blood at a normal blood sugar. And so you're going to go through that. Your body at rest is going to go through 2 teaspoons per hour. So brain uses 1 teaspoon an hour. The rest of your body uses 1 teaspoon per hour. And so when you're not eating and there's no more glucose trickling in from the carbs that you've eaten, it's up to your liver, right? So your liver takes over and it starts taking 1 teaspoon per 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And it does that overnight. But something happens around 5 in the morning or 4 in the morning, and it's called cortisol release, right? So cortisol, what I
Yeah.
call the stress hormone, is actually our get up and go hormone. And so
Mm.
cortisol is sending that little signal like, "Hey, Dan, you're going to get out of bed and you're going to use some energy. So let's get the liver kind of ready." And so it
Mm-hmm.
sends a signal to the liver to produce a little bit more glucose. And what happens with people who have insulin resistance is essentially that message comes to the liver. The liver starts producing a bit more glucose, and then the pancreas is going to release a bit of insulin to kind of slow it down and keep it under in check.
Yeah.
What you see is that break on the glucose production doesn't work properly, and so your blood sugars rise a little bit. And so that's a cortisol effect. It's called the dawn effect. If you wear a continuous glucose monitor and you're not diabetic, you'll see it. It's really subtle, right? But you'll still
Yeah.
see it goes up a little bit. It gets accentuated with the more liver fat that you have, the more insulin resistance you have, the more that gets accentuated.
Mm.
Um, it goes away, right? It gets better over time, but it correlates very closely to the amount of liver fat that you have. And so again, that doesn't happen quickly, right?
Yeah.
When you change your meals, your response to your meals happens, within the context of
Right
those
away.
meals.
Yeah.
So you can improve kind of your daily blood sugars quite a lot just by changing how you eat. This morning blood sugar takes a while because you got to get rid of that fat in the liver. So it will get better over time. And then the one thing I always like to say to people about this when they're measuring their morning sugars is remember, it's a cortisol effect. If you're stressed or you didn't sleep,
Yeah.
it's
Or
going to
did
be worse,
gonna be
right?
worse. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's pretty volatile, and so I have to really encourage people at the beginning of the program not to get bummed out if they get a high blood sugar in the morning because there's lots of different reasons for it, and
Yeah.
frankly, it's one of the pieces that's going to take a little bit longer to improve. We're talking weeks, not days.
Yeah. And you especially don't want to get stressed about it because then you're going to get more cortisol and you're obviously going to
Yeah, exactly.
make it
Right.
even worse, right?
We have had that happen, right?
Yeah, definitely. Excellent. So yeah, if you have a question that you'd like us to answer on another week of the show, head again to wherever the show notes are, and however you're watching this, there'll be a link to this post in the community for this episode, and you can leave your questions down below, and we'll pick another one out for next week, and we'll answer that one. So okay, so nearing the end here, we'll go through what's your thought of the week for this week.
So slow and steady wins the race, and it's advice that I'm always giving to people at the beginning of this is just slow and steady, right? We trying to be perfect. Whenever we try to be perfect, we do that for either 3 days or 3 weeks, and then we stop, right?
Yeah.
When we try to be better and we do, small bits of better done consistently, we really get some good results. So slow, steady, you're gonna really do well with this.
Excellent. Okay, and then to finish us off, we have a case of the week. So we actually, you went and did a deep dive into a patient with some of what their numbers were and stuff. So they actually have a video we'll play for that, and we can discuss it afterwards. So we'll let the video play now.
All right, sounds good.
Hi, it's Dr. Brendan Byrne, Medical Director, LifestyleRx. I want to do a case study today that relates to personal fat threshold. So the case study is of JR. She's a 62-year-old South Asian woman, has a history of gestational diabetes. In 2010, some weight gain, A1C increased into the pre-diabetic range, and in 2015, she was diagnosed with diabetes and started on medications. When she joined the program, she was on Janumet, so combination medication of sitagliptin and metformin. A1C is pretty well controlled, and BMI is in the healthy and optimal range. And so JR's goal was to reverse diabetes and get off medications. So really, when we look at her, what we see is very well controlled type 2 diabetes. Remember, in our program, what we see, the way we look at diabetes is it's this balance between the pancreatic beta capacity, so what your pancreas can do to produce insulin, and insulin resistance, so the amount of resistance that insulin receives that determines the normal blood sugar. So in JR's case, what we see is that her pancreas is actually working pretty hard to try and overcome some insulin resistance. So some pretty significant insulin resistance at about 2.62 times normal. Pancreas, combination of the pancreas plus her Janumet is trying to balance that, and it's almost in balance with an A1C of 6.3. And remember, in our model, what we see is insulin resistance is driven by fat in the liver. So about 400 grams of fat is usually what's driving the insulin resistance that we see in type 2 diabetics. And most type 2 diabetics need to achieve pretty significant weight loss in order to reverse this insulin resistance. But the problem for JR was, look, her BMI is optimal, right? She's at 22.7. Her waist circumference does give a little bit of a hint because she's kind of in the high risk zone, so just inside the high risk zone for women. But what we did was we took a step further and we said, let's go do a body composition. And so this is a whole body DEXA scan that is able to tell us body fat percentage, lean mass percentage, bone density. But really quite importantly, it's able to identify if there's any visceral fat. So we can see here that there is a little bit of visceral fat. And in fact, when we look at the visceral fat mass, it's about twice as high as we'd like to see. So we're able to identify that JR, despite having normal BMI, is carrying some visceral fat. So with that, JR embarked on our 12-week program, doing the 4+2 diabetes reversal strategy, and the 12 core behaviors. And what happened was her BMI did go down. So she went from 22.7 to 20.5. And that weight loss was enough to pull away that visceral fat. And that allowed her A1C to normalize, go from 6.3 to 5.7. And so this case is a great example of personal fat threshold. And so what we see is people have different amounts of healthy fat that they can carry, right? So some people can carry a lot of healthy fat before they start to spill over and get unhealthy fat. Other people have a lower personal fat threshold and at a lower or normal BMI may still even have some unhealthy fat. And so This case demonstrates that getting rid of that unhealthy fat is always the right thing to do, even if the BMI is normal. So again, kind of driving home this concept of personal fat threshold. And so conclusions, for lean type 2 diabetics, we've got to address insulin resistance. If we see insulin resistance, it's likely on the basis of visceral fat. Quantifying the visceral fat really helps us make a weight loss target that we're more comfortable with. It is hard as a physician to make a recommendation to lose weight when the person's BMI is normal. And whole body DEXA scan allows for this personalized measurement of personal fat threshold. And so super useful example of what to do when BMI is normal. What's next for JR? Deprescribing. And so with her A1C in the normal range, we can start to deprescribe. And usually what we like to do is take that combination medicine, split it up, drop one of them, probably leaving her on metformin, and then just make sure that that we're not seeing any kind of return to insulin resistance or climbing hemoglobin A1C. So that's our case study for this week.
Yeah, I find that's so interesting because I've heard some patients that come in, they're like, I have a basically normal BMI, but I still have type 2 diabetes. And how does that fit in with what we talked about with the, that we have that extra fat and stuff, but sometimes it's not even that much.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, we have to be careful how we describe fat, right? And so we demonize fat that, fat's bad, but fat's actually helpful, right? So people that have a higher personal fat threshold who can gain more fat, actually, it takes a lot longer to develop type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
And so it's this paradox between kind of that fat buffers energy overload. But people who have a small or a lower personal fat threshold, I think often as physicians, we don't really think about weight loss for them. And I know it's uncomfortable for me when I see somebody with a normal BMI to be telling them to, that they actually need to lose weight. So doing a DEXA or having access to a DEXA is great. And we should put in the show notes the where you can get a DEXA done, at least in BC. We'll probably start to other partners that can do this because it's super valuable data.
Yeah, for sure. We'll make sure we link that. Okay. So, and also that video, if you're listening to the audio only version of this, that was a really cool video. It had a bunch of cool graphics and stuff in there. So we'll put a link just to that video in the description as well. So if you want to just watch that video and see all the graphics that went along with it, you can find that when you're back at a computer or something. So, okay. I think that's it for this week then. So, thanks, Dr. Byrne, for being on here with us, and we'll see you again next week. You can follow us wherever you follow podcasts. So we're on YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the usual places. Hit subscribe or like or whatever the system is wherever you're watching, so you get the next one and you can help us to spread the show to other people. And yeah, so we'll see you next week. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Dan. Cheers.
Bye.